Dear writer, you need to quit. This is the show that helps you know what to quit, what to keep, and what to question. My name is Becca Syme. I'm a Gallup certified strengths coach with thousands of hours coaching 6- and 7-figure authors, mid-listers, major award winners, and new authors alike. Because everyone needs to quit something. Anyone can tell you what worked for them. And of course they say it might not work for you, but they can't tell you why. I can tell you why. Welcome to the QuitCast. Hi, and welcome to episode 9 of the QuitCast. My name is Becca. I'm going to be your host today as we talk about the Clifton Strengths theme of input, because I'm a Clifton Strengths coach. And of course, if you haven't heard of Clifton Strengths before and you're watching the QuitCast along with the rest of us, there should be a link in the show notes to check out some more information about it. And the basic concept is that we're all wired to be good at specific things in specific ways, and knowing that can help you lean into your strengths and be a better, faster writer. And so today we're going to be talking about the theme of input. And we're going to start off with Terry Schott and Becca Syme. We're going to talk a little bit about the theme itself. And then we have 3 authors who are all number 1 inputs today. We're in for a treat. And they're going to talk about how input manifests in their writing and what they wish they'd known about having high input before they started writing. And then I'm going to circle back around at the end and we're going to talk about a few takeaways and how to work with input if you are an input writer. So take it away, Terry and Becca. So input is a collecting strength, like very much, like sometimes physically, some people who have high input actually do like collect physical things like spoons and dolls and books and newspapers and things like that. But input, like collection, often will be information or facts or trivia, things like that. Like input people are the type of people who would do really well on Jeopardy, because they'll collect a ton of stuff about a ton of random things. And it's the basic core of it is they want to be helpful. Like input people are very helpful. They want to collect useful information. So like as a high input, often what I want to do is like I'll collect a bunch of information or concepts or facts because I want to at some point give them to someone who can be helped by it.
So that's a great point. We were talking about this earlier. I'm 14 on my input, but you just described me, what I do all the time. I'm good at Jeopardy. I'm good at Trivia Pursuit. It's not that I'm a know-it-all, but I always have some little factoid or some little I like little history things, or this happened this way. Or does it mean also that a lot of input people have a good memory, or they at least have a good way of keeping track of all that stuff? If they have a bad memory, they might have a little notebook or something.
Yeah, I think most inputs have good memories, and if they don't, they can work on it. And again, that better, faster concept of strengths is if you develop the trait, you'll get better, faster at the trait, at the strength. And so, like for instance, what I suggest to inputs a lot is if you don't have an organization system yet for how to do your inputting, so that you can take things in and then find them easily and give them to someone, then you should have one. Like my organization systems on my computer are insane. If you ask me for something, I have collected.
That's the opposite of me. That's the opposite of me now. I just went from being there to not being there.
Yeah.
What you just described sounds horrible to me.
Yeah. And I love it. I love it. Like I have.
You don't love it. You think you do. You just pretend. That's what you tell yourself.
Oh no, I love it.
No one can love that.
Yeah,
stuff.
I love it. I genuinely love it. Like I collect things and information that, and this is a really good point too. Depending on what your supporting strengths are, you might collect different things. Like I'm an input individualization woo. And so I collect people. Like I collect friends. I
collect people. Like Dexter collected slides and that kind of way. Is that what you're saying?
Not in a
Oh.
serial killer way. I don't
Oh,
collect
okay.
people in a serial killer way. I promise. I
Okay.
don't. But
No, but I get what you're saying. And you know who does what. You've got a guy for this, a guy for that, girl
yeah,
for
like
this.
that's my thing, right? It's like, oh, I've got a guy for that. Oh, I have a friend. And
Yeah.
because I'm also input connectedness, I also have like a friend in almost every city that you could ever go to. I know someone who can help you,
Yeah.
right? Because I know people everywhere. And
Man, that sure saved my butt last week. You knowing
yeah,
people saved me in literally 10 minutes. You might have saved my whole writing career.
yeah, yeah, that was input.
I'm here today with 3 really phenomenal authors, and all of them, this is the first time this has happened, all of them are number 1 in the strength that we are talking about. So I'm really excited for you guys to hear from them. If you haven't yet heard me talk about StrengthsFinder, please check the show notes for some links about what strengths are and what Strengths for Writers is, so that you can be caught up, because we're just going to hit the ground running with all of these wonderful women. And we're going to start with Rajani LaRocca, who writes middle grade novels, picture books written in Eastern Massachusetts, where she also practices medicine and bakes way too much. Her debut middle grade novel, Midsummer's Mayhem, is an Indian American mashup of Midsummer Night's Dream and competitive baking shows. I cannot tell you how much I want to read this book. So like Cupcake Wars, or like Chopped, or
like Cupcake Wars, I would say.
Oh my gosh.
I need this in my life.
I know, right? When I read that, I was like, wait, can I stop recording and go read this book? Yeah, I cannot wait.
Well,
and plus Shakespeare. Shakespeare and the Food Network, seriously, that's the most input sentence that I've ever heard in my life. I love it. It's so perfect. And then in the middle, we have Kait Nolan. So this Rita award-winning Mississippi author often swears like a sailor. That is true.
Guilty.
Calls everyone sugar, honey, darling. That's also true. And can wield a bless your heart like a saber or a snuggie. Also true. Depending on requirements. She writes small town romance and romantic suspense, and is number 1 input. Welcome, Kait.
Oh.
Hi. And then Valerie is right next to my face, everyone. Valerie is a best-selling and award-winning author of paranormal romance, lover of animals and chocolate, because why not?
Right.
And just finished a book, right? Valerie just finished a book.
I did. I just struggled through and I finished.
Congrats.
And now
we could join you in 2 weeks.
Yay!
And so what happens after you finish a book? Inputs. What do you do? After you finish a book, you start what? Inputting. Right?
Yep.
Right? Because so those of you who don't know what input is, it's the capacity to take in information or things. Also, like there are some hoarders among us, like me, who collect actual physical things, but to take things in and put them where they belong. So like input is sort of the input internal organization strength. It's the categorization strength. It's the taking things in. But then what happens when you input and you get all this information and you write a book is you output everything, right? You kind of like squeeze the sponge out. But then what happens? You have to fill the sponge again, right? Yeah. I love that they're all nodding, because I'm like, you can tell your number 1 input when that so resonates. You're like, yeah, my sponge is dry. So for those of you who have high input who are listening to this, one of the cool input hacks is always to fill your sponge, right? Like take all input. So Valerie, Kait, when you finish, and Rajani, when you finished your last book, right? Or you finish your edits, input all the things, because it'll help you to output the next thing. So
it's hard to describe. I mean, you have this thing where I get stuck literally in writing because I like have to go find something. I need facts or some kind of material. So I like have to literally, I can't even write around it. It's like, I need to know this, so I got to go look it up. And then, you're you're off on the internet, inputting everything.
I know, right? It never stops.
No.
Kait, what about you?
I was actually thinking about this earlier today. For me, it's like, okay, so who remembers Buffy, the Vampire Slayer?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
So we as high inputs are our own, we're Giles. And so I kind of think of it as like, oh, okay, I've got to go find this arcane text on whatever, which is probably on my bookcase right now, to answer whatever question I'm looking for. And so I think about, like Giles and get together with the Scooby Gang and finding all the information that we have to have. I'm not quite like Valerie in the sense of when I get stuck, I don't necessarily have a particular piece of information, but I definitely have like just volume. And that was a huge eye opener for me after taking your class. It was like, oh wait, I need to actually like prioritize all of the reading instead of using it as a reward for finishing. And
yes,
I ended up posting a thing the other day. It's like, oh hey, can you tell when I learned I was high input because my book reading for the year like doubled.
Oh yeah. Which will make all of your subsequent books better, right? And it's so funny you bring up Giles. I often will describe Spencer Reed from Criminal Minds as the ultimate high input, because if you ask him, he either knows the information or he knows exactly where to go find it, and he will just give it to you, right? Rajani, you're nodding. Does that resonate with you?
Yes.
Oh, sorry.
Oh, no. So, I mean, to me, I think high input comes, it goes with my other job as a physician and in medicine. So kind of we're trained that you either have to know it comprehensively or you need to be able to find where the answer is and you need to go right to it. So to me, that's also part of input. It's so curiosity is a guiding principle, like why are things the way that they are? And a love of research, but also the desire to be comprehensive. Like, did I really address kind of all the things I need to address in order to solve this problem in my book or whatever in life kind of thing?
It's so interesting you bring up too your medical practice, because I always think of doctors as high inputs because input is a helpful thing. So like the reason doctors go to medical school, the reason that they memorize information is to be able to help people when they need it with information, right? Which is sort of the ultimate example of high input. And I love that the consistency of that also means that sometimes you have a good memory. Like inputs often will be able to remember things, especially if they work on their input. Like a lot of people will have a mind palace. We joke about the Sherlock mind palace of input, right? Where you have these things that you can go and recall. Like, oh, I remember where that is in my head. And then you recall it. Yeah. I love that you guys all nod and laugh.
But I can't remember people's names.
Yeah, that's different though. That's not information.
Well, I remember passages from books, like fiction, works with fiction. If I really love them, I will just remember quotes from them. And my children will look at me blankly, like, why do you know that? But yeah.
Are any of you guys quotes at the bottom of your email, people? I know Kait is.
Yep.
Right. You have a quote at the bottom of your email. I put quotes everywhere. Just as an input, I'm always collecting quotes. And I'm like,
they're great.
I think this is what John Wayne said it best when he said blah, blah, right? Or like, this random person, I read a book and I can remember stuff. That is input. It's the ability to retrieve that information and collect that information.
My teenager says my tagline is, I've got a book about that.
Yes.
About anything.
I think that will probably be the quote board t-shirt for input is, I have a book for that. So the other piece of input then is the well. Because we have such a high capacity for information, it means that when we push information out onto the page, then we need to refill our input well. So, and let's start with Rajani. What do you do to refill your input well?
I just follow the rabbit hole wherever it leads. I just let myself read whatever I want to read. And then if I find something that's interesting about that, I let myself go and follow that. If I read really detailed fiction, it really helps me too, like especially historical fiction. I just read about this time period in a way that is immersive. And then and it may not be at all related to anything that I'm working on, but I enjoy it. And so I feel like, okay, I've accumulated a bunch of information, which is fun.
I also allow myself to like go and research like fun things. Like if we're, like when my kids were little and we would throw birthday parties, I would like research all kinds of ideas for like birthday party themes or whatever things to do, regarding a theme, or, research vacation spots and stuff like that. So I just allow myself, in order to fill the well, to just go where I want to go and not worry about where it's leading.
I love that. Kait, what about you?
In between, I definitely binge everything. I have, of course, an obnoxiously huge to-be read list always. I'll binge whatever I'm in the mood for that. And then sometimes I'll kind of allow myself to go down the rabbit hole to research for future projects that maybe I'm also high futuristic. So I've got all sorts of projects that are like down the line, but like I have a book coming. I have no idea when it's going to come in the pipeline, but it's got a witch in it. And so this has been sort of on my mind. It's like, oh, I want to research this. So this is what I ordered from Amazon.
Book porn. Book porn.
Let's see. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 9. 9 books.
Wow.
All on similar, So I'm like, ooh, I can read about this and that and the other thing. And so, I mean, I'm not going to plow through all of these in one fell swoop. I could, but I've got other things I actually have to do. But I'm going to kind of sip at these, and it'll work in the back of my brain for whatever. But when I'm really refilling the well for fiction, it's just reading more good, high quality fiction.
Yeah, I agree. Valerie, what about you?
Definitely reading. Usually I do stick with my own genre that I write in, but every once in a while I'll step outside that and do some contemporary romance or something. And I'll binge watch TV. I'll just like, get into a show or something, which helps sometimes, sparks ideas. Mm-hmm. My ideas come out of like the weirdest places. So, and as I was telling you last night, because I just finished a book, I sat down and I played Angry Birds. I haven't done that in forever, and it was like, that felt really good.
Oh, good. Yeah, so many people think that kind of stuff is procrastinating, and we talked about this in the Intellection podcast. When you have certain strengths, that can actually be freeing you up to think about stuff. And then, of course, as an intellection, you're filling the well, like you're just clearing the decks. I know for me, I have intellection and connectedness. And so I'm a big input by connecting and relating kind of person. So like when I finish a book, I often will go on sort of a binge of like talking to all of my friends about stuff. And just because like I need the, personal connection to get back into that. So input can take so many forms, and it fascinates me how different all of this is. Rajani, when you were writing your book, did you watch a lot of Cupcake Wars and stuff at the time?
Yes. So the Great British Baking Show is my favorite baking show, and one of my shows.
Yes.
Of all time. Yes.
Yes.
And it fits middle grade because it's not mean.
Yeah.
Everyone behaves themselves. There's, it's like everyone's very civil, and it's just for the pure joy of baking. So that was kind of the vibe I was going for. Nice. I also watched the Kids Baking Championship.
I love that.
Yeah, which was also really sweet. And it's with Duff and Valerie Bertinelli. And that was really good too. And it was a good break because I agree with you. I think sometimes just if you're writing something, maybe sometimes reading is not what you want. And sometimes just watching something on TV or a movie. What's that called? The 100-Foot Journey, which is a very foodie.
I love that movie.
Yeah, that was really great too. So yeah, I agree with you. Sometimes it's kind of a different medium that you need to fill the well, but not stress yourself out about writing.
What do you wish that you guys had known? And Valerie, let's start with you. What do you wish that you had known about input when you started writing?
How to get better control of it, I guess. So when you're having to do research, knowing when to stop, knowing, not to, wander off into other realms of things that you don't really need to know at that time. So I guess understanding that you actually have input helps you to manage it a little better.
Yeah. Kait, what about you?
For me, I guess well, knowing that it was a thing at all would have been a big one. When I got started years ago, I was working 3 jobs while I was trying to write. So, it was a matter of prioritizing just to get any words on the page at all. And so one of the things that got cut was reading for pleasure.
Mm-hmm.
And that probably shot me in the foot more than I realized, looking way back then. And certainly, kind of as I've gotten busier and amped up my production and so on and so forth, not knowing that really sent me into, and we talked about this before, really sent me into this really horrific case of burnout because I was not taking in fuel for what I was trying to do. And then suddenly it was just like, oh my God, I'm parched and dry. And then, you told me like, oh, you're a high input, you should do this. I'm like, oh, and then I'm like devouring everything. Like, I don't know.
You did. And you kept asking me, you're like, when is it going to be done? And I'm like, when you can start writing again. And it's so hard to explain that to people because, and Kait also has some other strengths that were really pushing her drive, which is not unusual to have with input. But she really wanted to start writing again. And I'm like, I wish I had better news. And I think she was frustrated a couple of times because I really was like, you have to keep reading because as an input, if you deprive yourself of that, and so many people who are on the 12 books a year treadmill are going to be watching this and bawling, right? Because they're like, I cut bawling. They're crying, right? They're trying to write 12 books a year and they're going to be crying because they've also cut their inputting and are dry and don't know it and can't write anymore. And if you have this capacity, you have got to fill your well. You just have to. Rajani, what about you? What do you wish that you had known about input when you started writing?
So I guess part of it is that some of these things that I find enjoyable are not a waste of time.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
There's like this guilt, like if you're not writing every single second that you're like, you're like messing around or something. And it's like, oh no, actually that's not messing around. It's helping the writing. So, it was nice to like kind of realize that and be like, oh, this is not that I'm just like slacking off and being, lame.
Give yourself permission.
Yeah. Like your book will be better because you watched those TV shows, right? Like that's what people need to understand is like, this is not a waste of time. This is necessary. It'll make your writing so much better. I mean, I can't tell you how glad I am that you guys are all bringing these things up because there are just going to be writers watching who have no clue and they need to hear this.
So if you're one of the writers who has this theme, and you can obviously find out about it by clicking on one of the links in the show notes and taking the Clifton Strengths Assessment. But you'll see with Terry, even he had a number 14 input and he still resonated with quite a bit of the definition, even of himself. And so there's a lot of this where when it's resonating with you, you have it on some level. It may not be in your top 5, but you may still have some of it and it's still good to know. But if you're a top 5 input, like the women on today's show were, you definitely need to think about how to nurture and how to grow your input as a writer. Some of that might be by letting yourself fill the well. It might fill the sponge. Some of it might be by utilizing your input more as you do book creation and inserting more little details. Obviously, again, we want to be careful to not go overboard with the input too, but maybe that's how you're going to shear off the basement of your input. But as we talk about with strengths, there's a balcony where it's acting in its best self. And then there's a basement where it's creating behaviors that are difficult or where it is, Gallup is now calling this raw and mature, right? So a mature trait versus a raw trait. You still have the behaviors, you still have the capacity, you still have the talent, but it needs to be developed into a more mature trait. And so one of the ways to develop high input is to learn about how detail can work in your books. If you are a person who puts too much detail in that is bogging the reader down and slowing them down, then that might be a way to shear that basement off and to bring that up into a more mature input strength. But if you need a lot of input in order to get books written because you need to output, then knowing that you need that and giving yourself the freedom to go ahead and input as much as you need to is really important. And obviously, there are those of us who have to meet deadlines. There are those of us who have to have a faster production schedule than others, and being aware of that, but knowing that there isn't a way to short circuit this process. There isn't a way to just magically snap your fingers and say, I don't need this. If you have high input, you need to give yourself time to take those things in. And it's not procrastinating, and it's not worthless, and it's worth your time to do it. It's going to make your books better. And so thank you so much for being here today with us on the Input Quickcast. I will leave some links for you in the show notes for the authors that you saw today in case you want to check anything out that they did. And I hope that you will like and comment and share. I hope that you'll subscribe to this channel, because if input isn't in your top 5, then we're going to do the ones that are. And so the more tuned in you are to what's going on in the Keepcasts or the Quickcast, the more you're going to be able to learn about yourself and how to make yourself a better, faster writer. And so I hope that you all have a great week, and I will see you in the next Quickcast.